Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. My name is Marco Visconti, and I welcome back to my channel and to the new Aeon Agora series. Today, I want to begin with a question that most people probably have clicked for. Have I ever achieved a contact with a known human intelligence? And what did it tell me? That phrase, known human intelligence, has become very fashionable again. Some people hear it and immediately think of UFO disclosure, of aliens, of interdimensional visitors, or some vast cosmic message being delivered to humanity from beyond the stars. But occultists have always worked with forms of intelligence that are not reducible to the ordinary human personality. We work with angels, with gods, spirits, the Holy Guardian Angel, and all those presences encountered through ritual, trance, invocation, and visionary work. So yes, I'm going to answer that question directly, but I'm also going to be careful with it, because the real question is not simply what did I see or what did something tell me. The real question is whether the contact made me more lucid, more disciplined, more honest, and more capable of doing my will. Then we're going to move into discussing Goetia, demons, and why do I not personally approach spirits as horses that need to be broken. We will talk about what it actually means to accept the Law of Thelema, especially when looking at currents like the one of the Fraternitas Saturni, of Michael Bertiaux Voudon Gnosticism, and Kenneth Typhonian Thelema. And we will also discuss the upcoming Sinister Forces course and what we're going to approach beyond just simply recap Peter Levenda's book. All these questions circle around the same problem. How do you practice magic seriously now in an age of too much information, too much spectacle, too many claims, and very little discernment? Before we get started, a quick word from today's sponsor, me. If you enjoy this channel and you'd like to go deeper into the work, you can find all my courses, workshops, and standalone lessons at magick.marcovisconti.org. That is where I put the more structured material for those of you who want to move beyond the occasional YouTube video and really study the stuff properly. You can also support my work on Substack, on Patreon, and through supers here on YouTube. All of that genuinely helps me making all these videos, these writings, these teachings, and building more material for people who are serious about the study of magic and Western esotericism. So if you'd like to support the channel and get something substantial in return, visit magick.marcovisconti.org and check out all the links below. And now, back to the video. Did you achieve contact with a known human intelligence, and what did they tell you? The honest answer is yes, but I would not frame it in the sensational way people often expect. The most important contacts I have experienced did not arrive as a sci-fi download or some sort of cosmic press conference. They were not interested in giving me lottery numbers or predicting the end of the world, or most importantly, confirming my specialness. In fact, the most genuine contacts tend to do exactly the opposite. They strip away vanity, they make your excuses very visible, and they confront you with the gap between what you say you believe and what you actually believe in. In Thelemic terms, the central mystery is the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. But I do not reduce this as an alien, or nor do I reduce it to, it's just the subconsciousness. Both explanations are just too small. The angel functions as an encounter with the deepest truth of one's being, but also as something radically other, something that stands outside the little ego and its preferences. What did it tell me? Not, you are chosen, which is what people often want to hear. The message was a lot closer, and it was like, do the work, stop lying to yourself, write, teach, serve the current, and do not mistake spiritual experience for spiritual attainment. And perhaps most importantly, test everything by its fruits. Does the contact make you more disciplined, more lucid, more responsible, more capable of love under will? Or does it make you just grandiose, maybe paranoid, maybe overly dependent on signs and mostly more hungry for attention? That distinction matters more than any story about what one has seen or heard. Can Skinner's Goetia material still be useful if I don't bind spirits and prefer a relational approach to spirit work? Dr. Stephen Skinner has gone on record multiple podcasts over the last few years saying that, according to him, demons are like horses that need to be broken. Safe to say, that is absolutely not what I suggest doing. I mean, his approach is much closer to a purist Solomonic model. Maybe it is the most pure Solomonic model that we know, whereby the magician stands in divine authority, constrains the spirit, binds it, commands it, and compels obedience through the machinery of the tradition. There is a logic to that system, and it has its own internal coherence, but it rests on a very particular worldview. My own approach is much closer to a sort of goetic shamanism, where the magician enters in relationships with spirits rather than treating them as hostile forces that need to be dominated from the outset. This does not mean being naive or sentimental or careless. It means the basic assumption is different. And thus the question becomes, are these beings inherently evil entities that needs to be submitted, or are they all complex intelligences with whom one may learn to negotiate, build pacts, establish boundaries, and develop working relationships? So yes, there may be, a lot of useful material in Skinner. You will find historical context, you will find the spirit list, you'll find ritual structure, you'll find textual comparisons, seal, correspondences, and possibly path workings depending on which book you're reading. But I would not simply take a coercive ritual technology and then lightly repaint it as relational spirit work. The worldview is embedded in the method. The conjurations, the bindings, the threats, the licenses, and ritual posture all carry these assumptions. Use it for what is useful, but do so consciously. If your own work is already moving in a relational direction, then treat Skinner as a source of study but not as a template to obey. Read him, learn from him, but don't import a theology of domination into a practice that is trying to cultivate contact, respect, and negotiated power. I would also add that Stephen Skinner has outed himself as a climate skeptic just a year ago on his Facebook page, and then doubling down again and again when people challenge him, so, who knows? Maybe it's not just always right, and only because he was the first to write something on this subject. But then again, these are just my 2 cents. When I have personally accepted the Law of Thelema, is it the Book of the Law, the New Aeon, or something even more? A good way to answer this is to separate accepting Thelema from becoming an orthodox Crowleyan, because those 2 things are not the same. For the individual, accepting the Law of Thelema means more than saying, I like Crowley, or I believe the Book of the Law is important. At the bare minimum, it means accepting the law as the governing principle of your magical and spiritual life. You accept that your task is to discover and accomplish your true will. You accept that love, agape, must be placed under will, rather than sentiment, compulsion, fear, and social programming. You accept that every man and every woman is a star, which means that other beings have also their own course, their own orbit, and their own necessities. It does not automatically mean that you have to accept every opinion that Aleister Crowley ever held, or join a particular order, or adopt every Thelemic ritual, or resolve any and every metaphysical question about Aiwass, about the New Aeon, or the literal status of the gods. Those things may develop through study and practice, but the real acceptance begins when the law stops being an idea you admire and becomes the standard by which you test life. And that, my friends, is the key difference. Anyone can say, do what thou wilt, and just turn it into a slogan. And they've done it. We know that very well. But accepting the law means allowing it to judge you, to refine you, and to slowly, like maybe alchemically, remove the parts of your life that are not truly yours. Speaking of various currents which have accepted the law of Thelema, what does that actually mean in practice? For example, the Fraternitas Saturni, Michael Bertiaux Voudon Gnosticism, Kenneth Grant's Typhonian Thelema, they all seem very eclectic. Is there an actual red thread binding them together? What they have exactly accepted? Is it the Book of the Law, the New Aeon? When we say that a current has accepted the law of Thelema, it usually means that it has recognized the Book of the Law as a genuine revelation of the present magical age, or at least as a decisive text for understanding that age. It has accepted, in some form, the formula of the New Aeon. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love on the will. But that does not mean that all these currents interpret Thelema in the same way, or that they all submit to Crowley as the final authority on every possible matter. The Fraternitas Saturni, for example, receives Thelema through very specific and particular German, Saturnian, and Luciferian lenses. Thelema is there, but it's not presented in the same way you would find in Ordo Templi Orientis or the AA. The Saturnian current refracts it through ordeal, through polarity, and very, very specific initiatory cosmology. Now, Michael Bertiaux Voudon Gnosticism is even more eclectic. It doesn't simply become Thelema plus Voudon. It takes Thelema as one current of initiation among several living currents, including Gnosticism, of course, esoteric Voudon, Martinism, Theosophy, and a highly idiosyncratic visionary maps. In Bertiaux's paradigm, Thelema functions less as a closed doctrine and more of a sort of new Aeonic permission to create, to combine, and to explore new magical interfaces. And then, of course, we have Kenneth Grant's Typhonian recension of Thelema, which is different again. Grant accepts the Book of the Law and the New Aeon, but then gives it a specific reading, which is, of course, stellar. It's focused on the night side, and it's focused especially on exploring non-human dimensions of consciousness. And here we have a lot of echoes with Michael Bertiaux's system, but seen through two different approaches. For Grant, Thelema opens onto forces beyond the human, beyond the solar phallic reading of Crowley, and most importantly, beyond any sort of what I call conventional occult respectability. So yes, there is a red thread, but it is not an institutional uniformity. The red thread is the recognition of the Book of the Law that marks a decisive shift in magical consciousness, in recognizing that free will is the central axis of initiation and that the old formula of obedience, of sin, of guilt, and external and vicarious salvations no longer govern the initiate in the same way, and that the magician must become responsible for discovering and embodying their own starry nature. What's the new Sinister Forces course going to be about, besides recapping Peter Levenda's book? So if you're watching this video the week it comes out, you will know that next week, on June the 3rd, 2026, we will embark on a 4-parts lesson series with Peter Levenda titled Sinister Forces, which is in fact based on his milestone publication that has just been reprinted by To the Stars Academy. This will not be a recap. People can read the book themselves, and in fact they should. What we're going to do is using the book as a map for a much wider exploration of occultism, of politics, of paranoia, and synchronicities. The central question is, what happens when occult currents, political mythologies, intelligence networks, and fringe religions becomes the fulcrum of a series of altered states of consciousness that begin to overlap? And I know that sounds dramatic, but it is a real question. Modern culture is saturated with conspiratorial thinking. Some of it is nonsense. Some of it is weaponized fantasies, and some of it points toward genuine structures of power. And then again, some of it functions almost like a degraded form of religious experience. People looking for hidden meanings, they're looking for secret masters, invisible causes, and most of all, they're looking for some sort of cosmic explanation for their own alienation. One of the major themes of the course will be discernment. How do we study this sinister material without becoming infected by paranoia? How do we take synchronicity seriously without turning every coincidence into revelation? And how do we examine occult politics without becoming seduced by the very forces we're trying to understand? We will also look at the idea of sovereignty as a magical and spiritual necessity. If you do not know your will, you are much easier to manipulate. If you have no center, any sufficiently powerful image or leader or ideology or even spirit can occupy that space for you. And so yes, of course we will discuss Peter Levenda's themes. We will discuss cults, secret histories, strange correspondences, and both America's and the world at large's occult underbelly, and most of all, the dangerous glamour of hidden power. But the real aim of this course will remain both practical and initiatory. We are asking how a magician remains sane, sovereign, and ethically aware while looking into very dark material. The point is not to become afraid of hidden forces, but rather to stop being unconsciously ruled by them. What's the most challenging part of being a magician or a mystic in the 21st century compared to 200 years ago or beyond? The most challenging part today is no longer access. 200 years ago, and certainly further back than that, the difficulty was finding the books, finding the teachers, and getting admitted into the circles where this material was preserved, and sometimes simply surviving the social and religious consequences of pursuing it. Today, the problem is almost the polar opposite. We have too much access. We have every grimoire, every yoga manual, every occult order's alleged secret material, every tarot system, every channel text, everything is available as a PDF in seconds. And so, as we just said, the difficulty remains discernment. The modern magicians has to learn how to separate the signal from the noise while being constantly assaulted by distraction. And that, to me, is the real ordeal of the 21st century magician. It is not anymore like, can I find the secret, but can I remain inwardly silent long enough to recognize what matters? And then there is also the problem of performance. Social media, especially in the last decade, has encouraged people to turn their spiritual lives into a brand, an aesthetic, an endless stream of opinions. The more controversial, the better, since algorithms only rewards rage bait. But the real mystical work requires the opposite tendency. It requires privacy, it requires discipline, and the willingness to do practices that look completely unimpressive from the outside. That is, keeping a magical diary, saying your adorations, meditating daily, returning to the same rituals again and again and again without, live streaming it. None of that translates very well for the attention economy. So in a strange way, the modern magician's problem is that everything is available except the conditions that make attainment possible. Silence is harder to find. Patience is harder to cultivate. Attention, as we just said, is constantly being harvested. And because occultism is so visible now, there is a constant temptation to confuse talking about the work with doing the work. And that is why I always go back to discipline. The great work has never depended on vibes, on aesthetics, certainly not on online identity. It depends on what you actually do repeatedly when no one is watching. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love and the will.